Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Some interesting stories we are tracking this morning. First of all, you all may have seen last week, huge stock price drop for Facebook. They lost like the most amount of value that any company has lost ever in history in one day. And now there's another big development there. Peter Thiel, longtime board member, is stepping down from that board. So we'll tell you what all of that means. Interesting move from Rumble with regard to the Joe Rogan controversy. They're making a move. We've got some other updates about the folks who may have been behind some of this smear campaign. Leslie Wexner, you may know him as the billionaire who effectively propped up Jeffrey Epstein and his lifestyle for years. Well, he had stepped away from political giving for a long time. Well, he's back, Saagar.
Oh, good.
Apparently his money is still green, and the Republican Party is happy to take it. So we'll give you those details. Also some moves at CNN that we are tracking both in the show and in my monologue. Saagar has an update on his feelings about The Rock for you to share.
It was a long and tortured monologue that I had to write, but it had to be done.
I haven't read it yet, so I'm interested to hear it too. And one of my favorite human beings and one of the most interesting thinkers, I think, in American life today, Adolph Reed Jr. is going to join us to talk about his new book, The South, which is wonderful and I highly recommend. But we wanted to start with what is, I think, a pretty significant shift in how blue states are thinking about the pandemic.
Yeah, this really caught my eye yesterday. It was a big watershed movement. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. So simultaneously, 4 different Democratic states all basically announced they were going to be ending their mask mandates. Delaware's indoor mask mandate was going to be lifted on Friday. The governor, John Carney, announced. That's significant to me, particularly, Krystal, before you even get to all of the other ones, because it is Biden's home state. And because Carney is a well-known kind of to be a Biden surrogate, very much a mind meld. Some of the Delaware senators and others are the people who kind of speak for him, quote unquote, whenever people try to get an idea of where the president lies. So that is one of the most significant data points. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This was very significant as well, which is that the New Jersey governor is ending the school mask mandate in a move to normalcy. And I'm going to read you specifically what he said. We are all cautiously optimistic in New Jersey that this most recent surge seems to have peaked. However, and what he says specifically is that we have to recognize that this virus is endemic. From moving to a pandemic to endemic, using the endemic language from a Democratic governor. And we also shouldn't we should also not forget, Krystal, Phil Murphy did not have as close to a re-election as he wanted to. It was much, much thinner than anticipated. Governor Youngkin obviously got all the press, but Phil Murphy came pretty close to getting defeated. So that's certainly one of the reasons behind this. The mask obviously was a huge controversy in Virginia and also in New Jersey. New Jersey overwhelmingly more Democratic, so he still got there. But this move, very much a signal. Let's put the next one up there on the screen as well. Almost, while we were planning this segment, this came out almost immediately. Governor Ned Lamont over in the state of Connecticut, also in the Northeast and a Democratic state as well, saying that he will be removing the mask mandate. And then late last night, we learned that Oregon has put an expiry on its indoor mask mandate. So all of these are very significant. They show that the tide is turning whenever it comes to politics. Here in the state of Virginia, it's still a little bit, or not here, but in the DMV area, across the river, let's put this up there. There was a Supreme Court case of the state of Virginia that rejected a challenge out of the Chesapeake County to the governor's executive order, which gives parents the right in order to determine whether their kids should wear a mask in school or not, and repealing the indoor school mask mandate. So it's still up in the air as the legal technicalities for that. So it's not the final blow to the actual order itself. But all of these you put together, you can't deny the tide has turned nationally. Krystal.
Let me lay on the Virginia piece a little bit more. There were a number of court challenges to the governor's executive order. The controversy here is that schools and some parents are saying, hey, this should be left to the local districts.
Right.
And there's an ambiguity in the Constitution, the state constitution, over whether the governor at the state level has the power to institute this executive order, which doesn't just say it's up to parents. It also says school districts cannot themselves decide to have a mask mandate. So the one that was just rejected at the Supreme Court level, there was not a finding based on like the evidence,
that's right.
there was no finding nothing there. It was just rejected for procedural reasons. There continues to be an ongoing lawsuit from seven different counties, and I think we have a tear sheet for that as well. They have found temporary relief, an injunction issue that allows them to keep their mask mandate in place while appeals are ongoing, and this continues to be litigated. So the parents' challenge that they took, my understanding is they used a sort of extraordinary measure to take it straight to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, no, we're not going to look at this case. We're not going to rule on it. So that one is gone. But this one regarding the 7 school districts still continues on. In terms of the larger politics, though, I mean, this really is kind of a turning point. I don't think it's an accident that all these states made the same decision at the same time. There's kind of strength in numbers. Yes. If you're one state, if you're one relatively blue state like New Jersey or Connecticut or Oregon, and you make this decision alone, you'll probably be subject to a lot more scrutiny, a lot more pushback, because we know, even though when you look at the overall polling, the broad population, including a lot of Democrats, are on board with, hey, we got to live with this thing.
About half.
We've got the vaccines. We got to figure out how to live with this thing. We got to rethink how we're approaching some of the restrictions that have been in place. Even though I'm on pretty solid footing with regard to public opinion, there is a very emotional and very strident response on the other side saying, you know, people who have been led by the media to, I think, overestimate the risk to kids, the risk to themselves, the risk to the community, who are deeply concerned about things like taking masks off of kids in school. I always think it's important to remember, and this is evidence that you and I have both tried to go over as responsibly as we possibly can. First of all, there are no studies that have sort of stood up to scrutiny that prove that masks in school have been an effective preventative measure to start with. So let's start there. It also is important to remember that the US is really an outlier globally.
Major outlier.
In terms of masking children. In Europe, their recommendations are no masks for people under the age of 12.
Right.
We also have evidence at this point of some of the detriments of wearing a mask. So it's not just like, you know, an inconvenience or annoying for you or for your kids. It has been detrimental in terms of child development, in terms of developing empathy, especially for young children. Of course, it makes it harder to understand what the teacher is saying, to understand what your friends are saying. This is a particular challenge for kids who are, you know, developing language and all of those things. So there have been costs associated with the mask mandates. And I think now, given where we are in the pandemic, it's very clear that moving away from mask mandates, especially in school, is the right move, both from a just looking at the evidence and evaluating it, but also from the political angle.
I mean, from the political angle, people have known this for a long time, and watching people catch up with it is kind of hilarious. Even Oregon, I mean, they're going to end it on March 31st. I mean, that's still a long time. That's, you know, a month and a half. But look, better late than never. Mayor Bowser, by the way, here in Washington, I hope you take a little bit of notice. But here's the real point when it comes to the politics. It was clear with this new photo that was released from Stacey Abrams in which she attended an event, and there's been some information that's come out on this event, where it was like a school reading with a bunch of children. She actually she said, I'll only enter the room if everybody is masked. Well, everybody who was masked include a bunch of kids, and actually Stacey Abrams was not one of the people who was masked. It became a symbol, really, of a lot of these policies and of the coming fights. Let's put the photo up there on the screen. So that photo was posted along with another series from her campaign, but it was very quickly deleted, Krystal. And let's go ahead and put the next one up there on the screen, please, from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, showing that the deleted Abrams tweet shows how school COVID policies are in the 2022 crosshairs. Almost immediately, she was targeted by both Governor Brian Kemp, who's running for re-election, and David Perdue, who is running to primary Brian Kemp. One of those two men, probably David Perdue, will be the Republican nominee for governor. But both of them went absolutely hard against her. It is the greatest gift. And it became a national symbol as well as, why are all these people? You know, there was another, I think it was a Long Island politician who did the same thing yesterday, took a photo of her without a mask on while there's all these kids behind them.
How about the LA mayor?
Yes,
who took the photo and said he held his breath with Magic Johnson.
I would confess, I posted the photo on Instagram and I was like, I hope she held her breath during the photo. I mean, I can't help but just ridicule this absolute nonsense. It drives me crazy watching these little kids with their masks on. But the really important part was whenever it came to how Abrams responded. She didn't say a word about the mask policy. Instead, she said it was shameful how Republicans used Black History Month reading event to fuel a pitiful and predictable critique. So basically, she's playing the race
Black
card.
History
So
Month
yeah.
over
Black
there.
History Month has to do with why you're wearing a mask when all these other kids are. I mean,
Okay.
it was one of the most outrageous things I've seen in terms of her defense. But let's be honest, very in character for Mrs. Abrams. And I think this is why she's going to go down big time in this governor's race. There's a lot of these people, Krystal, who were made under the Trump years, Abrams and Beto specifically. They actually did decent enough electorally.
Yeah.
But it was off of the backs of all these suburban whites who just hated Trump. They're actually terrible politicians. And they're going to find out for real how much people don't like them whenever bad old Trump is no longer on the national scene.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
point. I mean, I think the problem, and there are a lot of problems
Yeah.
with this photo, but it just symbolizes how you don't even really believe in all this, like the obsession over the pandemic protocols that you've been touting.
Yeah.
Because when it's inconvenient for you, you're happy to cast it aside. So what is this really about? It's about the theater of signaling your virtuousness. That's what this is really about. And I think that's what the photo exposes more than anything. As we head into the midterms, I mean, you can see the writing on the wall. Democrats are changing their policies at the state level. Yeah. There isn't a push at the federal level for like new lockdowns or new mandates or anything like that. They're kind of also accepting, all right, we got to move forward with this thing. So you're going to have on the one hand, Democrats actually shifting their positions and no real threats of like massive lockdowns again. But Republicans are going to hold on to things like this to say, hey, these are the people who, they will paint a caricaturish view of what Democrats would do were they back in power. And things like Stacey Abrams in this photo certainly feeds into that narrative. And I'll tell you what else is going to happen. Republicans are going to win. It's going to be, you know, an ugly year for Democrats. There's no doubt about it. Do I honestly think that coronavirus is going to be the central issue in this election? I actually don't. I don't think it's going to be the central issue. The Republican base is already energized around it. That's a done deal. The economy is going to be the central issue, as it typically is. That's what voters are telling pollsters that they care about. They feel like their concerns in that regard, with regard to inflation and just the sort of chaos and uncertainty of where things stand right now, are not being reflected in urgent action by the Biden administration. You've got, what, 70% of the country that says we're on the wrong track. That's what's going to be a problem for Democrats in this election, more so even than, you know, obnoxious pictures like this, which are certainly a political issue for her.
I agree. It's absolutely the economy. I would only point to COVID in such that restrictions are causing chaos and misery in people's lives. That's where I think it becomes important, not on COVID itself. I also am really enjoying this sprint by the Biden administration. It just came out this morning. Perhaps we'll go into it later. Biden officials are trying to recalculate U.S. COVID-19 hospitalizations, as in they don't want the national figures to reflect the with COVID hospitalizations because they want to try and not freak people out.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
They want to be able to show there's a huge decline.
Exactly,
in the number of people being hospitalized so
exactly.
they can show progress.
Which is so they can show their lib, base. But like, don't worry, it's not as bad. It's just there are so many things that they're trying to acknowledge now. With the mask mandates, now with recalculating COVID-19 hospitalizations.
Well, because wasn't it only basically New York that was really doing that we could get the data out of?
And it was also counting by, that's the other problem with the healthcare system. It's like counting by county data, in Miami and stuff.
We should have that information.
We should have had it for years.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant. But it's become especially relevant with Omicron, which is significantly more mild, but also so infectious. So you have a much larger number of people who are showing up at the hospital for other things, but happen to have Omicron sort of incidental to whatever real reason. So I would say now more than ever, that data is actually really important to get and to understand. Yeah.
No, I would say I support it. I just am watching this whole national conversation just change dramatically along with the polling. And part of the problem is going to be a lot of people who are deeply radicalized on this stuff that will fight tooth and nail for some of these restrictions that have made it part of their identity. And that central tension will become a big electoral liability on top of obviously just the economic chaos in the country right now. So the tide is turning. That's some good news. But there are still many other people within the regime who are ready to fight back. So it's not all but one. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think the blue states that are shifting right now, the truly blue states that are shifting right now is the most telling indicator we have that Democrats have decided, all right, we got to move on for this thing. This is killing us.
You're very right.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.